B'Shem Hashem Na'aseh V'Natzliach, Shiur Torah, Bruchim Habayim. We are back here on our Tuesday night Iggeret Hagra series, the letter that the Gaon of Vilna wrote to his dear wife and mother and the rest of his kids, and surely to us, that we're learning it here today and over the last couple of months, couple of hundred years after he wrote it, as fulfilling the words of the sages, that the divrei chachamim, the words of the sages, even the mundane conversations between them, need to be learned. Today's shiur will be for a refuah shlema for Rabbanit Sarah bat Anat, and also Tinoket bat Sarah, Rabbi Ephraim ben Shulamit, Pnina bat Shulamit, the baby Hilani bat Pnina, Rabbanit Levana bat Sarah, David ben Esriya, Doris bat Zhora, Orit bat Ilana, Talia bat Sarah, Yitro ben Avraham, and also for a Atzlacha Rabba for Marsha bat Julie, Ayla bat Marsha, Samuel ben Marsha, Cephas ben Marsha, Alexander ben Marsha, Louis ben Marsha, Shaul ben Farzane, Reuven Chaim ben Pala Parel, also for Zivug Agun, and also Joshua ben Noach, Alex ben Noach, Netanel Yosef ben Avraham, and also for Zivug Agun. Bracha v'atzlacha lekulam, also for Atzlacha for Oshri ben Doris, Gabi ben Doris, Elad ben Doris, David ben Esriya, Yitro ben Avraham. And all of Am Yisrael, all of the wonderful donors, all the wonderful supporters, all of the people that contribute, that are part of Team Hashem, the very, very special Team Hashem that continue to come up with new content, new different ways to get to Am Yisrael, and Baruch Hashem succeeding in doing so. So a little bit of a brief update for anyone who doesn't follow our WhatsApp group or Facebook page. We just launched a new campaign that Baruch Hashem we're giving out. We need to do something about all of this tragedies that are happening to our nation, as we talked about on Sunday. The situation right now in the world obviously does not look good, whether it's the political situation or the spiritual situation of Am Yisrael. Needless to say, the world is not in a good position, and especially now during the period between the 17th of Tammuz and Tisha B'Av. It's known as the 3 weeks. This is a time where major disasters and tragedies happened to Am Yisrael. They broke into Jerusalem during this time and eventually destroyed the holy Bet HaMikdash. Yimach Shemam v'zichram, these Reshaim, and for the last 2,000 years we have had no Bet HaMikdash, no physical home for HaKadosh Baruch Hu Shechina, no open miracles like we used to see on a daily basis at the Bet HaMikdash, and many other things that were missing. And needless to say, during this time, this is also a time where many other tragedies throughout the years have happened, which means that this is an auspicious time for Am Yisrael to do tshuva. We can't just say, okay, listen, we're going to cry like we did last year, we're going to cry like we did the year before, and some people say they're going to cry and they don't cry, some people actually cry, but it's all comes down to what is the tachlis, what's the bottom line, what do we actually get to? And the key is that we all have to get to do tshuva. So to do tshuva doesn't happen by itself. Just like becoming satiated doesn't happen by itself. You have to actually get the food and eat it. Just like being financially comfortable doesn't happen by itself. You have to work. You have to do something for it. The same concept goes when it goes to tshuva. Tshuva doesn't happen by itself. And to encourage our brothers and sisters, to encourage ourselves to do tshuva, requires some type of outside stimuli. And Be'ezrat Hashem, our organization, loves to become the tool that HaKadosh Baruch Hu uses to entice and inspire Am Yisrael and the rest of the world to do tshuva, to get closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to follow His Torah. This is what we pray for every single day. And Baruch Hashem, another opportunity came to our hands where we want to help each one of your communities actually do something about it. And that's why we're giving out our number one CD box set. This box set, Baruch Hashem, has been the most successful CD we've ever had. And it comes in a box like this for anyone who hasn't seen it before, just the pictures. And so it's a really nice box put together, nice marketing, and very appealing for the eye. And you have yourself in there 25 double CDs. 25 double CDs. They each come in a little packet like this. One is an audio CD with many lectures that we have about Pagam Brit, the issues of the wasting seed and morality and things of that nature. And the other CD is a DVD where you have 9 movies on it, which includes our Hashem Took Back His Millions movie that Baruch Hashem has reached millions of views and countless people doing tshuva. So this box set is typically something we sell on the website for $150. If you calculate the shipping is at least $20 or more dollars to the United States, obviously much more around overseas. So we're estimating it's at least $170 value. And we're giving one box per person for free in order for you to have, number one, a tool to help your community, your loved ones, the people that you are close to, the people in your community, to give them a tool, especially during this time, especially before Tisha B'Av, to see and hear something new that will entice them, that will motivate them, and most importantly, that will inspire them to change their lives and get closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. So the first thing is to make it very easy for you to have an actual tool in your hand. You go, you take this box, you give it to all of the people in their hands in the shul. Here's this, what is it? It's something free, it'll inspire you. The end. You don't have to give a whole song and dance to every person. Just give the CD into people's hands and you're finished. 25 is not much. It's 50 CDs total, but it's 25 double CDs. And this will give you a tool to inspire your local community, to inspire your family, to inspire your friends, and so on and so forth. The second thing is it's alleviating some of the financial responsibility that people have as far as to technically pay for things like this. It's not something that just fell out of the sky, but our organization's number one mission alone is to help Am Yisrael do tshuva. And if that means that we have to invest into you, we have to invest into your community, then that's what we're doing. And and so we're eliminating that cost, that yetzara that gets in the way. Even sometimes people that do have money, sometimes they don't necessarily have the money for this, or they don't think they do. Point being is, we're eliminating that yetzara. Really, the only thing you need to do is click on the link of that campaign, fill out your information, press go, and you'll be able to get a box like this, B'ezrat Hashem, over the next several days, over the next week or so, shipped out to you, and be able to give it out. Your only responsibility is to give these out as soon as possible. Don't get the box and just leave it in your house. That doesn't really make any sense. Also, don't just take the box and just put it in some corner in a Bet Knesset, hoping for somebody to discover it one day once they get to the corner that no one ever gets to. Try your at least a little bit more effort by actually giving it to people in their hands, and getting these out of the box within a day or so, and that way you'll have an opportunity to become a Mezakeh Rabim, a person that the Chovot HaLevavot says has merits that nobody in the world can compare it to. Even someone that has Torah like Moshe Rabbeinu cannot compare to a person that is a Mezakeh Rabim, a person that actually helps people do tshuva. So you can become one of those people. There's no higher level in the world than someone that does kiruv. Simply there isn't. The Chovot HaLevavot says it, the Zohar Kadosh says it, the Gemara says it, and countless sages say it. This, Rabotai, is important in every community. Whether your community is frum, or your community is Baalei Tshuva, or your community is completely secular, Whatever community you have, everybody can use this information and Be'ezrat Hashem be able to do tshuva through it, and you'll become that vessel that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is using to get to a lot of people. Baruch Hashem, we've given out hundreds and hundreds of thousands of these CDs over the last couple of years, and now we're giving these out for free, 1 box per person, obviously to make sure that there is enough for everybody, or at least as many people as we can handle financially. And also, you don't have to be responsible even for the shipping. We're paying for the shipping too. So really, literally, no cost at all. Only responsibility you have is fill out your information, and once you get them, give them out as soon as possible. If you simply are too busy or too shy or too this or too that, where you simply can't do it, you can't bring yourself to give these to people, and you still want to be a part of it, then you can sponsor the cost. You can sponsor 1 box, you can sponsor 10 boxes, you can sponsor 100 boxes. The point being is, you could still contribute and become part of this great mission during this time of tshuva. So that same site that we have, the campaign site, has the information for both, whether you want to be the one that gets the CDs, or you want to donate, or you want to do both. This is something that each and every single one of us needs to do to some capacity. There's really no excuse at this point, since it really only requires you to type in order to become a part of it. Now, aside from that, it's important that a person utilize any type of opportunity that they can. And one of the ideas that we have a few people have done is actually take the DVD in that CD and play it for their community on some type of projector, either in their house or at the Bet Knesset or at some type of Bet Midrash. Get yourself a screen and play the movie Hashem Took Back His Millions to as many people as you can get to come. Get them some popcorn, get them some pizza, get them whatever they want. Or if you want to make it a Tisha B'Av event, also a good idea to inspire people to do tshuva on Tisha B'Av. There's simply nothing better than that. And you can make a community event where people are coming to the shul anyway. Arrange the event obviously ahead of time. Arrange all the things you need. If you do not have a projector in your house or your community to play this on, just let us know as soon as possible, and we'll send you one. As we started a recent program where we have projectors that we're lending out to people that are going to screen these to their communities. We don't have that many, so if you want to do it, you have to do it as soon as possible. And as soon as you finish, you have to return it so we can lend it out to somebody else. The point being is, Rabotai, we're trying to make it as simple as possible for you to do kiruv. It really doesn't get more simple than that. We're giving you free stuff. We're shipping it out to you. We're even willing to give you the projector itself to show it to people. Really, the reality is right now we have no excuse whatsoever. There are so many tragedies that people are crying about every day. And we cry along with them, whether it's the disaster that happened last week here in Florida, and an entire building with hundreds of people, hundreds of Jews collapses during the night, killing, at this point, Hashem only knows how many, but at least 150 are missing. And everyone that they're finding is unfortunately dead. So the tragedy is tragic, to say the least. And you have obviously all of the other tragedies that we've talked about and we've heard about. And that's, I would say, still not even close to the tragedy that's happening in the world of the living, where you see all of these wicked people that are trying to, implement these different strange laws into the Jewish schools in America, in England, in Israel, and really destroy the Torah in every way that they can. Somebody sent me a video today of all the things that are happening in Israel. Literally, they're going into kindergartens, into first grade and second grade, and convincing the children that they are transgender, that the boy can be a girl, and the girl really wants to be a boy. And they're literally destroying these kids inside the school, with or without the parental permission. And if the parents fight about it, they care less. And this is happening in the schools in Israel. And it's not only in Israel. It's happening in America. It's happening in the UK. It's happening literally, this filth from these homosexual, these pedophiles, these sick people is happening everywhere. And it's the only rescue that we have is the Holy Torah. And it seems like, Rabotai, we're really running out of time. Not in a sense that Mashiach is going to come tomorrow or next week or a month from now or 10 years from now. Not about that. It seems that we're running out of time before the damage gets too big and the destruction is simply too much for any human being to fix. They're literally destroying the world. They're destroying the schools. They're destroying the system. And you're seeing so much tragedy happening on a spiritual aspect right now that if we don't start grabbing the Torah, literally to save our own lives, we'll have nothing left. We'll simply have nothing left. And this is part of the conversation today that we see that the Gaon of Vilna last couple of weeks talked about the importance of Shabbat. First and foremost, the importance of observing Shabbat. Second, we talked about the importance of Oneg Shabbat, the majesty of Shabbat, not to be stingy when it comes to spending money on mitzvot, whether that mitzvah is to honor Shabbat or that mitzvah is to wear a beautiful tefillin every day, not the one that your parents got you for a couple $100 for your bar mitzvah, but rather something that is substantial, that at the very least is in the same level, relatively speaking, as your car. You have a $75,000, $100,000 car, there's no right whatsoever for you to have a $500 pair of tefillin that you bought on eBay. Obviously, people need to understand that if you spend money on all of these mundane things and you don't spend money on the mitzvot, this is a kitrug. This is a prosecution against the person. Because Hashem says, I gave you all this money, not for you to buy a Mercedes-Benz and a BMW and have a vacation 2 or 3 times a year to the fanciest 5-star hotels. I gave you the money so you could spend it on my mitzvot as the priority and also enjoy different things in the world. But you only enjoyed things in the world, but you didn't necessarily, when it came to my mitzvot, you were homeless. You were poor. You were struggling. You never had money to give for tzedakah. You never had money to pay for tefillin. You never had money to do anything good for Shabbat. Every time when it comes to mitzvot, you simply are broke. But when it comes to buying a watch or buying this or buying that, you always have the money. And unfortunately, Rabotai, this is a kitrug. This is a kitrug, and this is also the reason why Shlomo HaMelech says that people that gamble will ultimately end up being poor. They'll lose all of the blessing. They'll lose all of the bracha they have, and they'll end up becoming very, very poor, struggling, and living a very embarrassing life. This I don't need to show you any proofs of, because if you know any gamblers, you've seen it in your life. These people become the most degenerate people out there, and unfortunately, many people today don't even understand the ramifications of gambling. And they don't realize how much of a tragedy it is that they're bringing on themselves, because Hashem gave you parnasah, He gave you money, instead of you donating the money to help Am Yisrael do Teshuva, to help Am Yisrael learn Torah, to help another sick person, to do something useful with the money. You put $1,000, $2,000, $5,000, $10,000 on a table. And when the rabbi said, listen, maybe perhaps you could do something good with the money to invest in Torah. Oh, yeah, sure, rabbi. And you give the rabbi $20 or $100. On the blackjack table or poker or some other form of stupidity, you have no problem throwing thousands of dollars. But when it comes to mitzvot, here's $100, rabbi. Here's $100. This is a kitrug. This is a prosecution against the person. It's a prosecution against the person, because if you are not going to use the money that Hashem gives you for the sake of Torah and mitzvot, there's simply no reason for Him to give it to you. And that's why people cry to me about not having parnasah, not having money. The questions are always what do you actually use the money for? And pretty much 100% of the time you see that those people simply lost their blessing. They simply lost their blessing, because they did bad things with the money. Either they splurged on stupid things, or they made sins with it, and so on and so forth. One of the things that I learned from my dear Rav, Rabbi Ephraim, is that I remember when we first started doing Teshuva and we started changing our lives and so on, we were on a financial decline, to say the least. For anyone who hasn't seen the movie, you could learn about those details in there. And we were on a financial decline, a massive one, where you're going from extreme wealth to extreme poverty in what seemed like overnight. And he himself wasn't exactly wealthy, to say it politely. And when I went to Eretz Yisrael and we went to the supermarket to go shopping for Shabbat, he said, get a cart. And he got a cart. And I said, well, we're not really, it was just me and my wife. And, not like we had 50 people with us before we had kids and everything. It's just my wife and I. And, he didn't have that many in his house. I think at the time only had 3 or 4 kids. So 2 carts, not really necessary, but went along. And I see, oh, you like that? Yes. So instead of taking one, he just takes whatever his hand can grab. Puts it in the cart and puts it in the cart. It was almost like lehavdi, like you're on one of those shows where they give the contestants 5 minutes to go buy as much as they can, and they don't really care what they're buying. They just want the most expensive stuff so they can win. It seemed like that, but here he was actually choosing everything, and everything he wanted, just take this. And at some point, I asked him, you don't have to do this for me. He says to me, I'm not doing it for you. Shabbat. So what do you mean? He says to me this, on Shabbat, there are 2 things we don't count. We don't count money, and we don't count the calories. Simple. That's the rule. We don't count the money, so we don't count the calories. We don't count the money because if there's something that will make you enjoy Shabbat a little more, if there's something that will give more kavod to the Shabbat, doesn't matter how much it costs. We're getting it. And as far as the calories, you don't lose by doing mitzvot. You don't lose. You're not going to die of a heart attack because you ate on Shabbat for the sake of Shabbat, not because for the sake of you getting fat. So the key is that when you have that kind of emunah, you have that kind of mentality, your life becomes a living miracle. And I saw that living miracle. And then, again, I didn't know this situation. When we get to the cash register, we both have practically tanks. Our carts have turned into tanks full of food and stuff. We get to the cash register. He gives them a card. I offered to pay. Obviously, he rejects. And it gets accepted. And we move on. He says, and then he starts saying Tehillim. So why are you saying Tehillim after we got on the store? He says Tehillim. He said, no, I got to thank Hashem. I said, what happened? He said, I have to thank Hashem that the card went through. I said, what do you mean? You didn't know if you have money to pay for all that food that we bought? He goes, no, I didn't even know if we have money. Forget about I didn't know I have money to pay for the food. I didn't even know if there was any money. This, Rabotai, is emunah. Emunah when it comes for the sake of a mitzvah. And this, in essence, is what the Gaon of Vilna has been teaching us for the last couple of weeks. Now the Gaon of Vilna moves on to the next section of the letter and says the following. וגם באתי לבקש מאיתך מאוד מאוד, בבקשה גדולה, שתדריכי את בנותייך מאוד, שלא יצא מפיהם קללה ושבועה וכזב ומחלוקת, רק הכל בשלום, באהבה ובחיבה ונחת. והנה יש לי כמה ספרי מוסר עם לשון אשכנז, יקראו תמיד, וכל שכן בשבת קודש קודשים לא יתעסקו אלא בספרי מוסר. The Gaon of Vilna says, I also come to ask of you strongly. He says me'od me'od, but in English saying strongly doesn't really sound correct grammatically. But he says me'od me'od. He uses the word me'od 3 times. He says, I also come to ask of you strongly with a great, awesome, and pleading request to guide your daughters very carefully, that words of curses, oaths, deceit, and dispute not issue from their mouths. Rather, everything should be done peacefully, with love, affection, gentleness. Now I possess a number of Yiddish language books on Musar, and so see that the children read them regularly, and all the more so on the most holy Shabbat. They should not be engaged in anything other than the books of Musar. See here, the Gaon of Vilna takes a step in the next set of instructions to his wife about the chinuch of the daughters. Later on in the letter, he'll start discussing the chinuch of the sons. But here he focuses on the chinuch of the daughters, where he's simply telling his wife exactly what needs to be done when he's not there, no different than when he was there, but even more emphasis on this because he's not there. Because the Gemara in Masechet Kiddushin, page 49b, says that 10 measures of speaking, the desire to speak, came into the world, and 9 of them were given to women. 9 out of the 10, meaning that women like to speak a lot more than the typical man does. Sometimes you have men like to speak more than women, but that's not a typical man. Most generally speaking, women like to speak a lot more. They like to talk on the phone. They like to text. They like to this. It's not something that is such a big new insight. But why is he emphasizing on this? To make sure that he's pleading with his wife strongly, special request, to guide the daughters carefully in issues that have to do with speaking. Words of curses, oaths, lying, disputing. Why? Why does the chinuch have so much to do with this? I mean, you would say it should be, the girls should be modest. They should wear, modest clothes. Because as we all know, modesty is the biggest mitzvah for women. So how come the Gaon of Vilna didn't say, listen, make sure that the girls are wearing long dresses and it reaches the ankles, and if we simply have no other choice and it has to be a little shorter dress, it has to be at least 6 inches from the bottom of her knee after she sits down. He goes over the halacha. How come he doesn't do that? And it should cover the elbows, and it should cover the neckline. He doesn't do any of that. He says here that you have to take special care of how they speak. How the girls speak. Why? Because Rabotai Karim, speaking is also part of modesty. In fact, speaking is one of the most critical parts of your servitude of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, where if one does not know how to control their speech, how to say what they want to say, when to say what they want to say, if to say what they want to say, and so on, a person can simply live an entire life without realizing that every word that comes out of their mouth is like a spear into their own heart. Many times you have women that they like to speak, they like to be friendly, but they make the same mistake like Shulamit did in the Torah. At the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, there was a woman named Shulamit who was very friendly, very talkative, very smiley, very bubbly. And one day, she said hello to one of the Egyptians. And that Egyptian, like most, men that have the brain of an animal, thought that she likes him. Didn't think about the fact that she has a husband or anything like that. He figured she likes him. Why? She said hello to him. And he decided that he's going to have his way with her. And this obviously led to a disaster. The child that came from there ended up becoming the blasphemer that cursed the name of Hashem, and ended up becoming he had to be given the death penalty, and so on and so forth. But this Shulamit is rebuked. She's mentioned by name in the Torah specifically because of the rebuke. The rebuke on her for being a bubbly person, being a flirtatious person, even without intention, by simply talking to someone she has no business talking to. Many times I tell different women, that, when they tell me, listen, I have a friend, he's the nicest guy, his name is this, his name is Steve, his name is David, his name is that. And I always tell her that you're not supposed to have a male friend. Oh no, but all my friends are males. Then you have a lot of problems in heaven. You have a lot of problems in heaven. If all of your friends are males and you're a female, you have a lot of problems with Hashem. Why? In Judaism, there is no such thing as platonic relationships. These types of relationships are considered inappropriate because they lead people to sin. And many times people are either naive, ignorant, or just simply stubborn about this particular issue, and they choose to have male friends, and then they're surprised that that very same friend that they had ends up leading to their divorce, either because of adultery or jealousy or both. The adultery that happens in the world today is at the highest level it's been in recorded history. Today, the statistics that were done in Eretz Yisrael, and surely things that I've done in the United States, simply make marriage without Torah a complete waste of time. A complete waste of time. Why? You're just going to get married, spend a bunch of money to feed a bunch of strangers, and only to get divorced within a couple of years. The statistics are so horrible that literally over 80% of the people that get married today are getting divorced. Now some people say, oh no, maybe they can't get along. No, it's not just because they can't get along. It's because of adultery. People cheat on each other. Why don't they have enough from each other? For obvious reasons. Once you do things that are against the Torah and have inappropriate relationships with other people, even if it's a so-called platonic relationship, that's the Satan simply putting a mine inside your house in the middle of the living room, just waiting for you to step on it. It may not be during the first year of the relationship or the second year or the third year, but at some point or another, you're going to step on that mine and explode. And you're going to explode your life and your marriage and everything else. And every other day, there's a new person that contacts me and tells me that their wife cheated on them or the husband cheated on them and they don't know what to do. And the reality is, Rabotai, there's really not much to do. Once the boundaries have been broken, once there's no trust, there is no relationship. There is no relationship. And of course, in Judaism, if a woman is known, if there's witnesses that she has cheated on her husband, even if the husband wants to be with her, he's not allowed to be. It's different with the husband, but nonetheless, still obviously he gets punished for such a thing. But the wife can't choose to stay with him if he cheats. Needless to say, the ramifications that a person has on committing adultery are enormous. When a man is with a married woman, he has lost his olam haba. He goes to Gaon and he doesn't come out. Needless to say, a woman that's with a married man lost her share of the world to come. She can keep Shabbat and read the entire book of Tehillim every single day for the rest of her life, and it won't help her until she does complete Teshuva. And those adulterous relationships almost always begin with someone that used to be a platonic relationship. The platonic relationship you had with your high school buddy. The platonic relationship you had with your neighbor. The platonic relationship you had with your cousin's friend. The platonic relationship you had with your coworker. The platonic relationship you had with your employee or with somebody else. All of those relationships end up with a disaster one way or another. One way or another. There's so much of a disaster. There's an entire tractate of Gemara discussing this specific thing called Masechet Sotah, which is sourced from the Torah itself, from the 5 books of Moses, Parashat Naso, a wayward woman, a woman that is suspected of cheating on her husband, that has to go to the Bet HaMikdash, drink the special water, and if she cheated, she on the spot explodes and dies. And the details of all of it are discussed in the Gemara. Who, what, when, and how. And in fact, Rabotai, if you looked in Sefer Yecheskel, the book of Ezekiel, where it says that the one of the things that is commanded as part of this sotah, this wayward woman procedure, is that the women have to also watch this wayward woman. They have to watch this wayward woman, Sefer Yechezkel, Ezekiel chapter 23, verse 48, where it says, and all of the women shall be chastised and shall not imitate your lewdness. That all of the women have to watch this woman drink this water to see if she dies or not. Because either way, she already did enough wrong to get to this position in the first place by secluding herself with a person that she wasn't supposed to, even after she was warned, and so on and so forth. Now, you may think, no, it's never going to happen to me. Everybody says that. No, I'm never going to do it. Everyone says that. No one goes into a platonic relationship thinking that they're looking to cheat on their husband or they're looking to cheat on their wife. No one gets into that. But Rabotai, today there is enough research that was done that the world of divorce is getting worse and worse to the point where the adultery is happening more on the women's side than it is on the men's side. Meaning that adultery, people used to think, oh, men are much more likely to commit adultery, to cheat on their wives than the husbands. But there was a recent report I read, it's been probably a year or two since I read it, where it says that women are actually more likely to commit adultery these days. So, I mean, it's again, this is not to make every single husband suspect his wife. If his wife is righteous, there's nothing to suspect. If his wife doesn't have any of these platonic relationships, there's nothing to suspect. But if you have a bunch of these guy friends, then he has all the reasons in the world to suspect you. And unfortunately, Rabotai, I have many of these women contact me and tell me about how they got themselves in trouble. They went to meet the accountant, but instead of meeting the accountant with their husband or in a office where there's a bunch of other people and the door is open, so there's no issues of yichud, no, they went out on a coffee. And before you know it, the accountant also became a second husband. I have an old friend, when I used to know when I was on Wall Street, he used to be a guy that I know, multi-millionaire. One time I went to his house, I thought I stepped into a castle. Enormous house. Everything that you can possibly want was in this house. It was like several stories, and it was a very, very wealthy guy. And his wife, with all due respect to you guys, was nothing to look at. Nothing to look at. Wasn't exactly Malkata Yofi, let's just say. She wasn't a beauty queen. But she was a nice person. He was a nice person. And we got together a couple of times. Anyway, Rabotai, they were extraordinarily wealthy. He had a very successful business. And one day, he calls me and he says, you hear what happened to me? I said, what happened? So I'm filing a divorce. I said, divorce? You guys have been married for 20 years. Why would you file a divorce? All your kids are grown, everything. You guys are happy, this, that. She says, you're never going to believe me. But I have this on video. I caught my wife cheating on me with the accountant, he says. Hashem yishmor v'yatzil. The accountant, that he was paying him tens of thousands of dollars every single year to do the financial accounting for his businesses, was also taking something else from him too, his wife. And this, Rabotai, is not one or two or three or five stories that I know. There are countless stories that I know of that, unfortunately, and they keep coming in, of people that have fallen for the Satan's trap that starts in a very nonchalant way. I'm just trying to be friendly. I'm just trying to have a normal life, they say. It's no big deal. I'm still single, so I don't have a husband that I have to report to. And then they come crying and say, oh, I can't believe it. I made a mistake. Is Hashem going to hate me? This, that. I told you, don't do it because the Torah says don't do it. You didn't want to listen. Now you have a mess. Now you have a mess. And many times this leads to even bigger problems. As it says, the mitzvah goreret mitzvah, avera goreret avera. One mitzvah pulls you into another mitzvah opportunity. That's the reward for it. And one sin pulls another sin. And you see many times that a person starts with one small sin that ends up becoming a complete disaster. This, Rabotai, all begins with how a woman communicates to the world. If a woman knows that Hashem is watching everything that she's doing, she will be careful with who she befriends, who she talks to, and how she talks to them, whether they're a customer or family member or otherwise. It all begins with the talking. And even though a woman needs to communicate, just like a man needs to communicate, there are things that are part of the nature of the world. There are simply things that are part of the nature of the world that Hashem instilled into the world, that when a man talks to a woman, there's, generally speaking, if she's a normal woman, nothing really changes. She thinks about the words that he says. He says blah, 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 and she thinks, oh, blah, blah, blah. On the other hand, when a woman talks to a man, she says blah, 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 he thinks she wants me. That's just the nature of the world. You ladies may not realize it. And even after you've probably heard this before, you don't believe it. Look no further than the divorce rate to see how true this is. Divorces happen because of adultery many more times than they happen not because of adultery. People typically do not leave a healthy relationship in order to be alone. And people do not necessarily go and destroy a relationship just because they're bored. Typically, they found something they believe is better. That is typically the reason. And every time somebody tells me, oh, my husband is not being nice to me, he's this, he's that, generally there's shlom bayit issues in practically every house. But sometimes there are certain things that happen where, out of experience, Baruch Hashem, that I prefer not to have, but nonetheless it's useful, I know when the guy is cheating. I know when the woman is cheating. There's certain things that a person can say or do that anyone with experience they're only doing that because they have somebody else on the side. They're only doing that because they have somebody else on the side. Or they're abnormal, and if they're abnormal, then it's a different story. But nonetheless, more times than not, he is doing that to you because he has a different woman. She is doing this to you because she has another guy. Now, of course, you don't tell this necessarily to people right away, but typically you see that eventually it comes out. Eventually it comes out, and it's an unfortunate reality. All of this happens, Rabotai, because people do not know what tzniut is. Sometimes people think that tzniut, that modesty, is only based on how you wear your clothes. And it's not just clothes. It's not just clothes. There are people that are very modest in clothes, but are filthy, disgusting people. Like this principal that was the head of a seminar in Australia. A woman principal that when you see her picture, you think that she is the most holy Rebbitzin that ever walked on the ground of the earth. Until you find out that she molested over 70 girls. So, clothes in itself is not enough. Surely it's a prerequisite, surely it's necessary, but it's not enough. If a person does not know how to control their speech, especially if they're a woman, they're leading themselves to a bad place. And you'll see that all of these bad relationships that people have that they end up regretting always start with an inappropriate conversation, an inappropriate tone, and simply that leads to inappropriate behavior. And in today's world of Sodom and Gomorrah, it doesn't take very much. It doesn't take very much. In the old days, in the times when our grandparents used to have to, have some type of courtship to go meet the woman, perhaps take her out a few times, maybe even speak to the parents, and then maybe eventually you would get married. And even if you are not exactly a very moral person, it wasn't something that would happen right away. The intimate aspect of the relationship wouldn't happen right away. It would take time, perhaps months or years or whatever it was. Today, Rabotai Karim, it's such a filthy, disgusting world that I have people telling me. Just there's a few young man that I spoke to just 2 days ago. 2 days ago. He told me, listen, Rabbi, I didn't know that I was going to speak to you, but when we spoke, I had a girl that I had to kick out of my car first before I could handle the conversation. I said, why? Is this your girlfriend? He goes, no, it's just today. I said, well, What do you mean, just today? No, every week it's somebody else. Every week it's somebody else. Sometimes more than one, sometimes 2, 3, 17, whatever it is. Meaning that it's like going to the supermarket, going to the deli. You just pick whatever you want. Today, Rabotai, people treat themselves like like underwear. Disposable plates, even. That's just the way it is. The filth of the world is running rampant. Running rampant. And unfortunately, this type of tum'ah has infiltrated even the religious world, where you see similar horrific stories that I'm sure every rabbi in every community that's close to his community has to deal with. Every rabbi in every community has to deal with these stories where you see that these people that for all intents and purposes were normal, decent people, looked frum, acted frum, kept Shabbos, all of the different things. And you see that when the closet was eventually open, it wasn't skeletons that came out, but rather an entire cemetery. And this, Rabotai, is happening. This is happening in our religious world, in the secular world, in the Jewish world, in the non-Jewish world. It's everywhere. And it all begins with a lack of understanding of what morality actually is, a lack of teaching about morality, and needless to say, a lack of management of our speech. People think, oh no, just as long as you don't say Lashon Hara, then you're okay. Completely wrong. Lashon Hara, Rabotai, is just one aspect of speech. One aspect of speech. And in some cases, you have to say Lashon Hara because it's a mitzvah. In other cases, it's forbidden. It's a sin that you could lose Olam Haba for. But either way, it's not the only thing. There's much more damage that happens from forbidden speech that's not Lashon Hara, but rather inappropriate speech, inappropriate conversation between a man and a woman that are not married to each other. Much more damage coming from that than coming from Lashon Hara. Much more damage. But this is one of those taboo subjects that perhaps people don't want to talk about in a frum world, because it's one of those things where it's in the closet, everyone knows, and everyone knows that if you open that closet, it's not going to be a skeleton, but rather a cemetery that comes out. But b'darkenu b'kodesh, we have to address things that are applicable and practical to our daily lives. And here the Gaon of Vilna is warning and pleading with his dear wife to make sure that the chinuch, the discipline that she has with the daughters of the household, begins with how they speak. How they speak. Because unlike the young boys that, generally speaking, their chinuch will come mainly from their Torah learning. When it comes to girls, the primary part of their chinuch will come from their parents and their parents' behavior. So says the Rav Chaim Friedlander in Mesilat Chaim Bechinuch, who says that the son's chinuch will primarily come by the way of a Torah study, whereas the daughter's chinuch will be derived primarily by the way of the parent. Hence the reason of why the Gaon of Vilna is pressing this, because he's not going to be there. There's going to be one less parent in the household. And so says Shlomo HaMelech, the Chacham Mikol Adam, in Sefer Mishlei, in the book of Proverbs, chapter 15, verse 50, Uksil Adam bozeh imo, that a foolish person shames his mother, where the Metzudat David comments on this verse, explaining that because women, the mothers, are dear mothers, they tend to pity their children and feel bad to rebuke them too much. As soon as, you want to rebuke the kid because you just broke something, you want to rebuke the kid because you just did something wrong, but as soon as one of these crocodile tears come out, which is practically on demand on some of these kids, literally, you haven't even said anything, and if he sees or she sees you looking a certain way and they know they're in trouble, automatically, like gosh, like a fountain. You could take out a fire with all these tears. Right away the tears come out. And of course, the soft heart of our dear mothers, they don't want to rebuke, oh, it's okay, baby, I know, pookie, stookie, pootie, dooba, what boobies? You just broke half the house, almost put the place on fire. No, shh. Shh, let me deal with him. What? You just wanted to kill the kid 2 seconds ago. No, chas v'shalom, don't talk about my kid that way. He's a tzaddik. Tzaddik? In which mador in Gaon is a tzaddik? What are you talking about? The kid almost lit the house on fire. Shh. And the mother simply cannot see any wrong in her kids. She can't. She can't. Why? Unlike the father, who simply contributed for a moment, the mother looks at the kids as limbs. As limbs. As part of her body. Because they were part of her body for 9 months. They were part of her body. So what is she going to get mad at the right hand because the left hand doesn't like it? A woman has a hard time. A mother has a hard time rebuking her kids. And the Mitzudat David explains that because the women tend to pity their children and refrain from disciplining them, people end up scorning the mother because a rotten child comes out and they blame the mother for raising such a son. Hence the reason why the Gaon of Vilna here is begging his wife that she should not approach the chinuch of her daughters in this way, or any of the children. When it's time to rebuke them, you have to rebuke them. If they if they behave misappropriately, if they speak misappropriately, and so on. Don't just look at the tears in order to determine whether they need to be rebuked or not. Rather, look at the action itself, which is very, very hard. That's why the Shla Kadosh in Shar Oslot, Shar 4, in Derech Eretz 26, writes that a woman's great responsibility in life is not to be lax when it comes to chinuch of the kids. Where he says that based on the Gemara in Masechet Brachot, page 17a, it points out that the reason why women go to heaven is not because of their Torah learning, because they're not going to a kollel and learning Torah. They're not doing kiruv and have a yeshiva and have a bet knesset. That's not the job of a woman. What's the job of a woman in this world? Is to make sure that her husband and her children are learning Torah. She's pushing them to learn Torah. She's pushing them to have Yirat Shamayim. She's pushing them to go in the way of Hashem. That's the job of a woman. Now, the Gemara says in Masechet Brachot, page 17a, for this she'll go to heaven. For this. Now, you would think, when you look at it from the surface, especially as a guy, I have to go learn Torah day and night, do mitzvot, put on tefillin, fast, this, that, a lot of things that she doesn't have to do. If she's pregnant, she doesn't fast many times, if this, if that. So it looks like I got the short end of the stick sometimes. Hold on a second. How come I have to do all of these things just to get to heaven? All she has to do is make sure that I go do it. All she has to do is just make sure the kids go to yeshiva and they do the mitzvot. Seems like an easy thing. Wrong. Wrong. Anyone that loves their wife enough to pay attention to what she does sees, in reality, women got the short end of the stick, not the men. Why? It's very hard. It's very hard to raise a kosher home. And that's an understatement of the year. For a mother to raise children to be tzaddikim and tzaddikot is literally, it's easier to take Mount Sinai. Find Mount Sinai, first of all. Go find it and then lift it on your head. Do some lift with it. Easier than to raise a kosher home in today's world or any world. So hard. Why? You, first and foremost, have to take your heart and put it in a corner sometimes. Put it in a corner sometimes. Why? Because you have to deal with things in a Torah way, which means you have to put your emotions aside. He did something wrong. And even though he's crying, even though she's crying, and it really melts your heart as a mother, you have to discipline the kid. You have to rebuke the kid. You have to have a sit down with this kid and speak to them until they understand what you're saying. You have to do a bunch of things that are not just playing and fun and vacation and pookie tookie and chuki chuki. It's not just that. It's not just that, Rabotai. To make sure that your kids end up becoming tzaddikim in today's world, Rabotai, is so difficult. And many men simply don't get it. They think that they have the hard job because they work in a construction company, or they work as a lawyer, or they work as a doctor, or they work as this, or they learn Torah, and so on and so forth. And they figure that they come home and they see all the kids are behaving nice, and they're all around the table, and they're waiting for Abba to come, and they say hello. They think that it'll all happen by itself. Everybody was born that way. It doesn't happen that way. It doesn't happen that way, Rabotai. It doesn't happen that way. Takes a lot of effort. Takes a lot of effort to raise kids today. And when parents do not have a good relationship, they're not going to understand. They're not going to understand how much investment is required by each parent in order for the house to be a kosher house, in order for the house to be a healthy house, for the children to grow up and want to be like their parents. Many times people don't understand how much influence they have on their kids. They figure, listen, I'm giving my kid everything he wants, so he'll be better than me. Wrong. You give your kid everything he wants, for sure he will not be better than you. He'll actually be much worse than you. He'll be much worse than you. One of the worst things you can do is give a kid a bunch of money during your life. One of the worst things you can do. Before he even knows how to handle money, you're giving him a bunch of problems. But a lot of parents think, no, if I give my kid a bunch of money, therefore he's gonna be set. He's not gonna have the struggle like I did when I was working and I was wrong. Wrong. You have to teach your kid morals. You have to teach your kid how to be a decent human being as number one thing. And when it comes to the ladies, you have to teach your daughter that modesty begins with how you speak. How you speak, how you dress, how you behave, who you speak to. If you have one of these daughters that's not shy, that likes to talk to every boy and likes to talk to everybody out there, you're not doing a good job as a parent. Unless she's 4, 5, 6 years old, she doesn't even understand the difference between right and wrong yet. But needless to say, you have one of these teenagers that has guy friends, you messed up. Doesn't make you a evil person, but you have work to do in order to get her back. But you have to work more like a kiruv rabbi from now on, rather than the parent. Why? Because the parenting part at that point is almost too late. It's almost too late. When the kid's already 16, 18 years old, you almost have no influence on them when you act like a parent. You have to act more like a kiruv rabbi and try to get them to listen to Torah and perhaps get the real truth from some outside person. Because to listen to you, it's going to be almost impossible for them after they've heard you say different things for the first 16 or 18 years of their life. But needless to say, Rabotai, here we see that the Shlach Kadosh says that the reason why the woman merits to get a share of the world to come, it's because it's due to our efforts to facilitate our children's davening and learning, and it's because it's the woman's nature to be soft and yielding. A woman must steel herself to give the necessary rebuke, even in the face of tears and weeping, and guide her children in the proper path. In simple words, what the Shlach Kadosh is saying, a woman has to act against her own nature in order to discipline her kids if she wants a chance to go to heaven. That's the conclusion. If you want to go to heaven, you have to act against your nature. Your nature is, as soon as you see the little boy and the little girl cry, rebuke stops. I love you, I'm sorry. Wait, but Ima, you didn't do anything. Yeah, but I yelled at you. All that stuff, you have to stop. You have to stop and really understand that there's a time and a place for everything. Of course, you have to push with one hand and pull with the other. Anytime you rebuke your kids, anytime there's a little bit of a flick, and that's what we're going to talk about next week, perhaps when's the time, and if there's a time to hit the kids, and when there is, and how there is, and so on. There's even halachas in regards to that. But every parent needs to know that everything that you do has to come from a good place, has to come from love, not in order to hurt somebody, not in order to attack someone. The whole point of everything is to develop this kid to become a decent person, not a scared person. Don't have your house be one of these places where everyone's afraid of their own shadow because maybe you're going to be hiding in it. You don't want to live in a house like that where everyone is scared of you. In fact, the Gemara says a person that raises such a household, it's going to be a cursed house. The wife is going to end up violating Shabbat because of him, maybe even cheating on him because of it, and the kids are going to hate him. So a husband can never have a house where everybody's just scared of him because his wrath. Same thing with the woman. You shouldn't necessarily have a household where all your kids are scared of your shadow. Every time you rebuke the kids, you tell them once they got the point, then you bring them closer, you give them a hug, you tell them you love them, and so on and so forth. Same thing with the husbands. You have to rebuke one of the kids, you have to punish one of the kids, and so on and so forth. After the point is done, don't leave them in their room for 5 years. And hopefully they're going to get the point. After a few moments, finish, yalla. They got the point, yeah, move on already. Say, okay, and yalla, move on. I love you, I love you. But the point being is that don't just give in without a legitimate reason. Don't just skip the step of rebuke and punishment because you don't like to see your kids cry. Because if you don't allow your kids to cry, if you don't allow your kids to understand that they did something wrong, all you're doing is just raising another Hitler. All you're doing is just raising a kid that's going to torture the world, and you included. So the Shla Kadosh says that you'll have to act against your nature in order to achieve this. And if you're able to act against your nature, then you are no different than your Talmid Chacham husband. Why? He's also acting against his nature, sitting in a chair all day and learning from a book from 2,000 years ago. That's not his nature. His nature is going to be go fulfill his desires, chase money, this, that, the other things. Him learning Torah nonstop, that's against his nature. Or perhaps he works and learns. That's not his nature. His nature is work, and have fun. Work and go make problems in the world. So if he is under your influence, your motivation, your inspiration to go get him to learn for a few hours every day. Honey, I know you just came back from work. I know you're tired, but it's still early. It's only 6, 7 o'clock. Why don't you go to a shiur Torah? Why don't you go learn Gemara for a couple of hours? I'll take care of the kids. And be a smart woman. Get your husband to learn Torah. Get your kids to learn Torah. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, even if you have to bribe your kids, bribe them with presents and things like that to get them to learn Torah, 100% mitzvah money. It's 100% mitzvah money to go buy your kids a present in order to entice them to learn Torah. Because it's not their nature to want to go learn Torah. So if you're able to act against your nature and only give them a present if they learn Torah, and only give them a present if they did what they're supposed to, and rebuke them even if there's tears, meaning you're going to act against your nature, and get them to act against their nature, all of you deserve to go to heaven together. But when people are not willing to act against their nature, and they only follow the nature of the Yetzer Hara, everybody loses. And that's what one of the Gedolei Hador, Rav Gershon Edelstein, he says himself, when it comes to chinuch, he says, it's well known that it's the nature of a child to mimic his parents' actions, even without their verbal instructions. When a child sees that his father learns Torah and davens properly, he'll instinctively understand that it's a good thing, and he will follow his example. And he says, I myself remember from my own childhood that when I was just 5 or 6 years old, I would return home after Yamim Noraim, the high holidays, davening, reviewing the Nusach, the songs of the Baalei Tfilah, and mimicking all the grown-ups. And so if a father has Yirat Shamayim and is careful not to speak Lashon Hara, the son will be the same. And if the father has good midot, the son will be one as well. Will also have good midot. So here we see from some of the Gedolei Hador of how they grew up, how they themselves grew up. The stories that you hear from the Chachamim are always priceless. always priceless, especially when those stories are close to home. My own dear Rav Ephraim, he learned in Yeshiva Ktana when he was younger with one of the grandkids of Rav Ovadia. And his grandchild obviously grew up to be another one of the big blessings to the world, another one of the big rabbis in the world. And when Rav Ephraim saw him not too long ago, they had a conversation. And each one always wants to know what's the other's motivation and so on. And he says, listen, you know what got me to learn when we were in yeshiva together and we were learning, and I was always into learning and you were always into learning. Not everybody in the yeshiva was always like that. Some of the guys want to go play, want to do this, want to do that. But, Baruch Hashem, these are two learners that sat side by side with each other. He says, you know what my motivation was? He says, every morning, my father, when I was little, would take me, pick me up, and bring me next to a picture of my Saba, Rav Ovadia. He says, you see him? He says, yeah, it's Saba. He goes, yeah, I want you to be like him. I want you to be like him. Okay, Abba. Every morning, same exact thing for years. So my mind was, okay, I want to be like Saba. I want to be like Rav Ovadia. I want to be like Tzaddik. That's what motivated me from the time I was little until today. I want to be like Rav Ovadia. This is also the reason, Rabotai, why you'll see very often in Jewish homes where Torah is appreciated, where Torah is loved, where Torah is learned, you will see pictures of tzaddikim in the house, some more, some less, but nonetheless, you'll see pictures of tzaddikim. And I'll tell you the truth. When I first started doing tshuva, I thought that's weird. I actually thought it was very weird that people have pictures of people. I didn't know who the tzaddikim were and the magnitude of being a tzaddik and how difficult it is to learn Torah, and not needless to say, spend your entire life learning Torah. As a secular person, I looked at a bunch of old men on the picture, on the walls, that are not family members. Weird. Why does this guy have this guy with this rabbi? Why is this rabbi on his wall? Why is that rabbi on the wall? I never really understood it. I mean, I respected it, never really said anything. But when I first started doing tshuva, the last thing on my mind that I was one day going to have, my walls full of tzaddikim. When do you see this? When do you start understanding? First and foremost, when you start learning Torah yourself and start appreciating the Torah and the people that taught it, the people that toiled over it. And then you realize, Rabotai, these are my heroes. These are my heroes. This is what I want to look at. Needless to say, this is what I want my kids to look at. I don't want my kids to look at an empty wall. I don't want my kids to look at some basketball player or movie star. I don't want the only pictures that my kid sees is on some billboard of some half-naked person. I want my kids to look at tzaddikim. Why? I want them to look at their heroes. That's our heroes. That is our heroes. This is the reason why part of chinuch is to teach the children and ourselves as many stories about tzaddikim as we possibly can. As many as you can, every single day. That is one of the most critical teachings of the chinuch, of Torah in general. So much so, Rabotai, that Rabbi Nachman Mibreslev, alav shalom, says that the stories of the tzaddikim are like Maaseh Merkava. Maaseh Merkava is like the inner workings of how Hashem runs the world, runs the heavens, which no man knows. He says, when you learn about the lives and the different events that happened in the tzaddikim's lives, you'll know this is how Hashem runs the world, how He manages the supernatural. And these are the stories, Rabotai, that we need to teach our children. These are the stories we need to teach our children. Now, I've heard this next story I'm going to tell you at least 5 to 10 times. Different people, generally speaking, the same version. But b'siyata dishmaya, and in your merit, I recently had a chidush about it. What's the story? One of the Gedolei Ador in America, Rav Kamenetsky, Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, alav shalom, He writes in a Ekev Yaakov, in his Sefer Ekev Yaakov Parashat Vayikra, that the fundamental difference between chinuch of sons and the chinuch of daughters is that when it comes to a son, it's the association of friends. Association of friends that's going to, what kind of friends they have is going to be what motivates their ultimate result as far as their chinuch. But the daughters, it's primarily the home environment, the parents. The parents. Now, Rav Kamenetsky, he himself has a story that he told, and many other rabbis have told. It's a famous story about chinuch. What was the story? A personal story in his own life. One time, Rav Kamenetsky and his son, which is currently one of the Gedolei Hador, Rav Shmuel Kamenetsky, who I had the fortune to speak to a couple of times and get one of his signatures in one of our wars that we had years ago against one of these Reshaim. Anyway, Rav Kamenetsky was one time on a plane flying and his son was with him. On that same flight, there was some well-to-do professor also with his son. And they were flying a long-distance flight. I believe it was America to Israel, Israel to America, that type of long flight. Now, throughout the entire flight, every few moments, that well-to-do professor, his kid is asking him for something. Dad, can I have this? Dad, I'm hungry. Dad, I'm thirsty. Dad, I'm cold. Abba, I'm this. Abba, I need that. Abba, this, Abba, that. You know, the kid is asking for stuff. Like it's a restaurant. Like it's a, I don't know, some type of button for the store staples, that red button where you can just press it and it just things come. You know, they want something and they just say, Dad, I want this, Dad, I want that. And the dad doesn't want to hear the kid cry or complain, so he pleases the kid. On the other hand, Rav Kamenetsky, he's learning Torah on a plane. And every so often, his son, who's today Rav Shmuel Kamenetsky, one of the Gedolei Hador, the son asks his father, Abba, do you need water? Abba, do you maybe need a blanket? Abba, do you need me to help you with something? Meaning the exact opposite. The professor's kid is asking for things from his father like it's a social security office or unemployment. Whereas the tzaddik's kid wants to help him. Can I help you with this? Can I give you this? Can I help you with this? Now, of course, the professor noticed this major difference. And at some point, he comes to the rabbi and he says to him, listen, you have to tell me how you did it. How is it that the whole flight, my son keeps asking me for things like most kids? And I have to give him what he wants because I don't want to hear him complain or cry. But your kid, I noticed the whole time he never asked you for a single thing, and in fact the opposite. He brought you a blanket, he brought you water, he brought you a coffee, he brought you this, he brought you that. He wanted to bring you the whole time he's serving you. How'd you do it? How did you train him to do that? Rav Kamenetsky says, it's very simple. You see, you raised your kid and you told him that, where'd you come from? Monkeys, right? He says, yeah, that's what we believe. He says, okay. I raised my kid and I told him that we come from Adam HaRishon. So, monkey, Adam HaRishon, what's the difference? He says, the difference is that you told your kid that you came from a monkey, which means that every generation after the monkey is more developed. Therefore, he, your son, is more developed than you. You are less than him, which means the rule of the world is the less serves the more. My son learned different. My son learned that we all came from Adam HaRishon and there's Yeridat Adorot. the degradation of the generations. Every generation is lesser than the next. We keep going less and less and less. There is no way that a person can be as great today in wisdom and Torah than anyone that in the previous generation. Not just in the generation of Adam HaRishon or Noach or Moshe Rabbeinu. No, even literally 50 years ago, 100 years ago. Each generation is less than the next. So because of that, my son knows that I'm closer to the source. I'm closer to Adam HaRishon. I'm more than him. Hence the reason why he serves me. This particular version of the story is what I've told before, and I'm sure you've heard before. But you see, another insight that I had, or perhaps another way of understanding the same exact story is, of what Yaakov Kamenetsky was saying, was that in essence what he was telling this professor is that you teach your son to learn more and more because you need to develop new ideas in order to progress in the world, in order to reach higher wisdom. That's what you teach your son, because you believe we came from some monkey and we are developing new ideas. So your ancestors took two stones and got them together. Fire, fire. That's it. That's what you believe your ancestors are. There are some monkeys, some Neanderthals, some rocks. That's it. That's what you believe. And before you know it, instead of it being stone, you have two iPhones perhaps. So in essence, what you're teaching your son is that he has to come up with new ideas of his own in order to develop a better future. Professor says yes. Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky says to this professor, he says, that's the difference. You see, in our tradition, in our life, we learn from the wisest man of all, Shlomo HaMelech, there's nothing new under the sun. Nothing new. In fact, there's the degradation of the generations, which means all of the wisdom that exists in this world is in our holy Torah. In this book you don't believe in. And in fact, the explanation of all of that information, all 7 wisdoms that exist in the world, was taught by our holy sages. Which means there is nothing new that my son needs to figure out or can figure out. Rather, if he wants to be wise, he has to learn from the Chachamim that preceded him. One of them being his father, and the other his grandfather and great-grandfather, and so on and so forth, all the way back to the original source. If he wants to advance in the world and to get to a better place, he has to learn from the ones who know more than him, because they're closer to the original source, because they toiled over it more than he did. Therefore, he is bound by this rule to respect his elders, needless to say, to respect his father. That's the difference. Here, Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky is teaching us that Emunat Chachamim is not a suggestion, but rather it is a fundamental precedent in order for you to have successful chinuch, successful upbringing of your children. If your children do not see you as parents have emunah in the Chachamim, there is no reason whatsoever for them to ever respect the Torah, not the written one, not the oral one, and needless to say, not their parents. Because if whatever they have in their hands is potentially greater from their perspective than everything that preceded them, why should they respect anything that preceded them? If they are capable of rediscovering the wheel, if you will, Why should they respect anyone who hasn't? You see, Rabotai, when our sages taught us the Torah, they weren't coming just from a place of wisdom, but rather a place of experience. Experience raising kids, experience dealing with kids. And when they taught us all of these things, well, we have to have emunah in our chachamim. We have to have faith in our sages. Not just faith that our sages were good people and so on. No, but rather that our sages know a lot more than us. And if we don't understand what they're saying, what their intention is, or why they said what they said, or why they paskin a certain way, that's our flaw. That's our limitation. That is our mistake, our shortfall, never theirs. But what you see today that's common in the world of heretics, of people that like to recreate the wheel, call themselves rationalists and modernists and all types of other ists and isms and so on, is that the first jab that they go after, whether they're coming from the Christian missionary world or also call themselves Messianic Jews, or they call themselves rationalist Jews, or they're modern Jews, or whatever it is, all of these people have the same target number one that they look to destroy, which is emunah in the Chachamim. Emunah in the oral Torah. Emunah in everything that preceding them being greater than them by default. Why? Their ego cannot handle such a reality. They have to believe that they can be, and perhaps even are, greater than their predecessors. This is 100% apikos. That's what it is. You will never be, even if you study for 1,000,000 years, never be greater than the previous sages we had. Not Moshe Rabbeinu, not Isaiah the prophet, not Yechezkel, not Ezra Sofer, not Rabbi Akiva, not Rabbi Shimon, not the Rambam or the Ramban, not Rabbeinu Yonah, not the Arizal, not the Gaon of Vilna, not Rabbi Akiva Iggeret, not Rav Ovadia and anybody else. Never. Why? Because that's emunat chachamim, Abotai. All of the sages that preceded us will always be greater than us. But that doesn't mean that we can't be great. That doesn't mean that we can't be successful in whatever endeavor we enter, even including the Torah world. You can become the Gedol Ador in your generation. But to say that you are greater or have a better clarity or better understanding than the previous sages means you have no emunah in chachamim. And this, unfortunately, has become a standard type of perception by the so-called rationalists and messianics and so on. It's a common denominator they all have, where they all believe that they can and have rediscovered the wheel that their ancestors did not. This is why, Rabotai, when it comes to the tzaddikim, they didn't just teach us the laws of the Torah, but rather they taught us the stories of their lives, the stories of their students' lives, to show you how the workings of HaKadosh Baruch Hu are not necessarily always in line with what we think is common sense or what we think is normal or rational. But needless to say, these are the workings of Hashem. And Hashem has certain rules that He Himself instilled into the world, that whether we like it or not, these are the rules. One of them is the degradation of the generations. If a person does not have faith in the previous sages, that by default they are greater than he can ever be, that person is not going to end up in such a very good place. And their children for sure will not follow in his footsteps that will lead to a good place, because they already are being given the wrong direction to start off their life. So when it comes to the emunah in the chachamim, when it comes to understanding what we have, a person needs to know that if you want your kids to have faith in Hashem, have faith in our Torah, that it knows more, that it has more, and like the Torah, and love the Torah, and want to toil for the Torah, you have to make sure you teach them as often as possible about those that did. And that's why every Jewish house has to have literally a library of Sipurei Tzadikim. As many Sipurei Tzadikim, stories of the righteous books, as you possibly can. There are, Baruch Hashem, an endless amount of stories about our sages. In video, in book, in notebooks, in all types of things. There's no end. There's no end, Baruch Hashem, to how great our nation is. And anyone that wants to teach their kids the true diamond that's inside Judaism, you'll see it inside the stories of the sages. And you'll see that many times the parents, you, will actually get strengthened from those stories no less than your kids do. Now, one of the things that the Rav Kamenetsky also mentioned is that when it comes to chinuch, it also has to do with the friends that you allow your kids to have. Now, this is an understatement. Why? Because today, Rabotai, it doesn't take much. It doesn't take much to ruin an entire neighborhood. Every class, every neighborhood has a bad apple. And when parents are too busy to be parents, and they're too busy with chasing money, they're too busy with chasing their own pleasures, they're too busy with managing life, even if it's good things, and they don't have time to monitor who their kids are friends with, it's very easy to one day wake up to a tragedy. And you see that your kid has completely abandoned any belief whatsoever in God, any belief in the Torah, and everything else in between. And this, unfortunately, is a common denominator in every neighborhood, where literally it's like in Egypt, en bait en bomet. Every house has like a dead spiritual body in there. Now, Baruch Hashem, we have a lot of experience in this field as well. We deal with a lot of different people that have either their kids or their neighbors or somebody that has gone off, and Baruch Hashem, we've succeeded in helping many others, but I always tell you guys that I can never help somebody that's not willing to help themselves. I'm not going to chase anyone to call them and try to convince them to come back to Hashem. Rather, I'm going to send them some material. If they watch it, if they learn, then we can talk. Why? Because if they're not willing to learn, there's nothing that you can do for them. A person that's not willing to learn and dedicate time in order to see there is a better life other than what life they're leading is not a person that anyone can help. Simple. A person needs to have something of a desire to learn or to change or both. Now, many times there are certain situations where that's simply not possible. Why? Because it's not your kid that needs the learning. It's your friend's kid. It's your neighbor's kid. It's somebody else. Now, you have to, as a parent, you have to make sure that you make the decisions of who your child is going to spend their time with. Now, of course, there's so much a parent can do, but at the same time, there is so much that a parent can do. On one end, it's a limitation. On another end, it's actually a lot. It's not a limitation. So you have to choose who your kid's friends are by making sure that first and foremost, you keep your kid learning as much as you possibly can. And if that kid wants to learn all day and all night, let them. Don't be one of these dumb parents that tries to convince the kid to go have fun. Honey, stop learning so much. There's a lot of stupid parents that literally convince the kids to stop learning Torah in order to go have fun. It's I don't know why parents think that's a better idea for some reason, but for whatever reason or another, there are some parents that have like the mamash, the malach hamavet, Satan, and Yetzirah all inside them, and they are the ones that cause their kids to not want to learn Torah anymore because they entice them to sin and to do things that are forbidden or perhaps even things that are a complete waste of time. But needless to say, sometimes you have the kid and he goes to school or he's in a neighborhood and he meets another kid and the other kid is not exactly a good apple. He's perhaps a bad apple. Now, you have to do whatever you can to get that kid, that new friend, out of your kid's life. Which means, if you have to bribe your kid, give him a present, have a talk with him, rebuke him, entice him with a different idea, bring him a new friend, Whatever you got to do to get him away from this kid, you have to do. So much so, Rabotai, that we recently had, this happened not once, but we recently had one of our dear students tell me that there is this, they have a cute son, and their son is friends with another kid. And the other kid, although he's a cute kid, he's a kid that's interested, like most kids, he's interested in learning. Unfortunately, this kid comes from a very secular home that has no Torah, no mitzvot, no nothing in the house. And those kids were learning together. Their kid is frum, goes to yeshiva, and so on. And his friend doesn't have anything. No Torah, no mitzvot in their life, but still Jewish. So in the beginning it looked cute because their kid was teaching the other kid. He would come home, and he would do his homework, and he would bring this kid over. Yeah, look what I learned in yeshiva, and they would learn together. But before you know it, they saw that their kid, although he was teaching their kid, teaching his friend, the behavior of their own kid changed a lot more than the other kid. But to the detriment, to a place of negativity, not to a positive way. Why? Because the learning itself was simply an activity, just like playing toys, just like doing other things. After the learning was done, they would go play. And he would go to this kid's house, he would go in the neighborhood and so on, and he would see how the kid's family is, and he would start acting like them, because he comes from a frum house, he goes to a non-religious house, and he sees that the mother is walking around with ripped pants, so he comes home and his mom discovers that his pants are ripped. In the beginning she thought, oh, whoa, wow, he got into an accident, anything happened? Yeah, accident. But after a few pairs of pants have a hole in them, it's like, how is it possible? Every other day there's a hole in the pants. She discovered that it's not because he keeps falling. It's because he's ripping his pants because he wants to look like his friend's mother that walks around with ripped jeans. And a lot of other things. Now, we had a conversation about this a couple of times, but when we realized that there's simply no way out of this situation. The other family is not going to change anytime soon, if ever. They're not open to change. They don't see a reason to change. And in reality, there's no way to stop these two kids from hanging out together. There's no way for them not to see each other every day. Simply no way. They live literally next door. So what will be? Advice, you have to move. Now some of you are saying, what? I have to move? I have to move a house because my kid made a bad friend? Yes. You have to move. Sometimes that's what's necessary in order to save your kids. You have to move houses. Yeah, but I bought this house and I got a good deal on it, or I got a bad deal, and the market price is this, the market price is that. All of those answers and all of those are wonderful answers. Call them whatever you want to call them. Excuses, real reasons, life, whatever. Take all of them, put them all in a nice package, put a bow on it, throw it in the garbage. Why? You want to save your kid? Move. You don't want to save your kid. Stay. Why? Because the reality is, why do we say move? Because we know that if you stay in that house with your kid being surrounded by one or more bad friends, one day the outcome of all of that will be something beyond your control. And at that point, you'd be willing to sell your lungs, not just your house, your lungs you'd be willing to sell, just to undo the mistake. But it'll be too late. It'll be too late. And I've seen one too many times where people were stubborn about certain things, stubborn about the school they were sending their kid that wasn't good enough, stubborn about the neighborhood they were in, stubborn about their job, stubborn about different things, and not being willing to change. And then one day it comes up and they regret they haven't changed. They regret they haven't changed, Rabotai. The road to hell is full of good intentions. Everybody has a good intention. They want to stay because they feel like their kid can overcome it. They want to stay because it's not the right time. They want to stay because it's not in this. It's not the budget. It's not the... Sometimes you have to make extreme decisions, or what seems to be extreme. in order to avoid something much worse. And that's part of chinuch. That's part of chinuch. Now, the Gaon of Vilna also said that this chinuch for the kids has to focus on their speech, to make sure that they don't curse, they don't make oaths, they don't deceit, they don't dispute with people. When it comes to dispute, it comes to fighting people, there's actually a mitzvah in the Torah, not to follow the ways of Korach v'adato, not to be a Baal Machloket. And this is in the Sefer HaChinuch, the Sefer of the Mitzvot. It's one of the Mitzvot from the Torah, not to be Baal Machloket. Now, the question is, how come when it mentions this mitzvah, it's called the do not be like Korach ve'adato. Don't be like Korach and his followers. How come it doesn't say don't be like the argument between Korach and Moshe Rabbeinu? Why? So Rabbi Ephraim says that's because the argument between Korach and Moshe Rabbeinu was really not an argument between Korach and Moshe Rabbeinu. It was Korach and Korach only. Moshe Rabbeinu says, "Ve'anachnu ma." We're nothing. We're nothing. You're not arguing with me. You're arguing with Hashem. You're arguing with the Torah. You're saying this is allowed when it's not allowed. You're saying that you should do this when you shouldn't, when the Torah says otherwise. You are a Baal Machloket. You're creating this dispute. I'm not disputing you. There is no dispute. This is, in essence, the same exact concept when it comes to, for example, when we talk against certain people, whether it's Manis Friedman or Meza, all of the other Reshaim that we mentioned countless times. That's not a machloket. That's not a machloket. There is no machloket between me and Asher Meza. There is no machloket between me and Manis Friedman or Ephraim Goldberg or anybody else that's on the list. There is no machloket between us. The machloket is between them and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. All I'm doing it is shedding light on that. That's not being a Baal Machloket. That is protesting for the sake of the honor of Hashem. That's in essence what Pinchas did in this week's parasha, where it says, Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen, Eshiv et Chamati, מעל בני ישראל בקנאו את קנאתי בתוכם, ולא חיליתי את בני ישראל בקנאתי. לכן אמור אינני נותן לו את בריתי שלום. Kadosh Baruch Hu says, this week's parasha, Hashem spoke to Moshe saying, Pinchas, the son of Elazar, the son of Aaron, a Kohen, turned back my wrath from upon the children of Israel when he zealously avenged my vengeance among them. So I did not consume the children of Israel in my vengeance. Therefore say, behold, I give him my covenant of peace. Meaning, if you are fighting for the sake of the Torah, where someone is desecrating the Torah, and you are protesting against it, you are doing things in order to warn people from these heretics and apikosim and so on, that's not a machloket. That's simply fulfilling the Torah. A machloket is in essence when both of you are actually have some ground to stand on. Both of you are working within the inner workings of the Torah, within the laws of the Torah. Now, of course, there's a machloket l'shem shamayim, and there's a machloket not l'shem shamayim. A machloket for the sake of heaven, a machloket not for the sake of heaven. But sometimes you'll say, listen, I'm arguing with this other guy about what the Gemara says, or what their actual halacha is. Now, sometimes you're really fighting because you're trying to figure out the truth. You think you have the truth, he thinks he has the truth. This is a machloket for the sake of heaven. Sometimes you're not fighting because you're looking for the truth. You're fighting to show everybody that you know better. You're fighting because you want to get the position, not because you care about what's right and wrong. That's machloket, not for the sake of heaven. But needless to say, they're both considered a machloket. Why? Because they're still within the inner workings and the laws of the Torah. But when one party is not doing what the Torah says, but rather desecrating the Torah, fighting against the Torah, publicizing things that are the opposite of what the Torah is, making fun of the Torah and its sages and what it says, with all types of silly statements and heretical things. That's not a machloket. That's a protest. That's a protest of someone that is desecrating the name of the Torah and Hashem, its creator. So here, the Gaon is telling his wife, make sure that the kids do not have machlokets. Why? I'm not concerned about them going against the Torah and becoming heretics. Why? Because I know that if you're going to control their speech and you're going to make sure that they're modest, they're already working inside the Torah. They're already part of the nervous system of the Torah world. They're already in there. I'm not worried of there being a machloket. That's not a machloket. That's a heresy. I'm worried about a machloket that's within the inner scope of the Torah itself, where they're simply not going to listen to each other just because they value their opinion more. Make sure they listen to each other. Make sure they listen to the rabbis and the rebbitzins and so on and so forth. I'm not worried about heresy. I'm not worried about them turning into a Mesa or a Manis. I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about the Gaon of Vilna says, I'm worried about them forgetting that all of Am Yisrael are Baalei Teshuva. I'm worried about them thinking that just because they grew up frum, they're better than some Baal Teshuva or some convert. And therefore they're not going to care about them, like many people today. Or I'm going to worry that just because they're Baal Teshuva, they think that they're better than the people that are frum because they chose the Torah and the other people were just born into it. And so on and so forth. Make sure there's no machloket. Make sure there's no machloket. Not the one that's for the sake of heaven, not the one for not for the sake of heaven. Make sure they listen to what we teach. Why? Because that's the derech. That's the derech. That's the derech. Now, the Chafetz Chaim says in his Sefer Shmirat HaLashon, Sha'ar HaZechira, chapter 17, based on a pasuk that says, Bakesh Shalom Ve'radfeu, seek out peace and pursue it. Since here, the Chafetz Chaim is trying to teach that sometimes you will have a machloket. Sometimes, especially the more you learn Torah and you associate yourself with people that are learning Torah also, that are decent people, not heretics, you'll have a debate. You'll have a dispute. And it is for the sake of heaven, but sometimes things get out of hand. The way he talked to you, you took it personally. The way he talked to him, he took it personally. You know, that's... Chafetz Chaim says, a Torah says, even if you argue for the sake of heaven, like Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel, some of their Talmidim actually got into a fist fight. Tzadikim got into a fist fight. But it also tells us that eventually they married their kids to each other. Why? Bakesh Shalom Ve'radfeu. Ask for peace and chase it. Meaning that sometimes we're going to have a dispute that's a good dispute, that's a heavenly dispute, that's a kosher dispute. But perhaps it's going to be a misunderstanding. Perhaps it's going to be a miscommunication. Perhaps there's going to be a little bit of crossing the line. So I'm going to be reminded that the Torah says after whatever line was crossed and whatever person got offended and so on and so forth, I'm going to go and ask him to come learn with me again, to come teach me again, to come serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu together with me again. And if they don't want to forgive me, let fail, chase them again. You failed today, you didn't accept your apology, you didn't accept your invitation. The first time you asked, let fail, chase him. What does it mean chase him? The next day, ask him again. What about if he said no again? Ask him again a week later. And again and again and again. Why? It's hard to find kosher people. If you finally found one, make sure you chase him. Make sure you chase him. Now, what is the way to make sure that your kids are going to learn the necessary information in order to be disciplined, good, Yireh Shamayim children, and eventually adults? Here the Gaon of Vilna gives the medicine. Gives the medicine. If he's offering this medicine to his children, needless to say, this is good for our children too. That's why anytime somebody tells me, listen, there's this place that somebody asked me about, and I'm not sure if I should tell them they should go. What do you think I should tell them? There's this person that is asking me if they should do business with such and such person. I don't know what I should tell them. The answer is always the same. If you would do it, if you would go, then you should recommend it to other people to do it also. But if you wouldn't do it, don't recommend it for anybody else. If you wouldn't go, don't recommend it for anybody else to go. Point is that don't give people advice from what you think their perspective is. Don't assume other people's perspective and other people's desires. Only assume your own, because that you know for sure. And simply tell them, from my perspective, if I were to be in your situation, I would do it. But we are different. I have such and such, you have something else. I want such and such, you mates want something else. But I'll tell you from my perspective, I would do it or I wouldn't do it. You can decide for yourself based on what you view my perspective as. But I'm not going to tell you based on your perspective, because I don't know what your perspective is. I don't know what your perspective is. So here, we need to give people advice that we would do ourselves. And that's exactly what the Gaon of Vilna is doing. He's giving his wife the advice that we need to listen to, because he's given this advice to his wife to do it, to use this advice for his kids. This potion, this cure for chinuch, he's giving it to us now. What is it? He says to his wife, now I possess a number of Yiddish language books on Musar, and so that the children will read them regularly. And all the more so, on the holy Shabbat, they should not be engaged in anything other than the books of Musar. Here, Rav Steinemann, Alav Shalom, says, notice that the Gaon of Vilna is specifying that the books are in Yiddish. Why is he specifying in Yiddish? Because if you're going to teach the kids, don't teach the kids in a language they don't understand. Teach them in a language they do understand, because the most important part of teaching is that the student understands. This is the reason why many times I tell people, if you are new to the Torah, if you are a Baal Teshuva or you're new to yeshiva and so on, make sure that you're learning in your first language. Don't force yourself to learn in Hebrew or Aramaic or some other language just because everybody else around you is doing so. Learn in your first language, especially when it comes to halacha, to know what the law is, or it comes to Gemara. Really, the most important part of learning is to understand what you're reading. But sometimes you have people too embarrassed to tell everybody or to admit that they don't know or that they're behind, so they force themselves to read the words in Hebrew because they know how to make the sounds, but they have no concept whatsoever what they're saying. And I've met guys that literally went to yeshiva for several years, but you ask them anything that they learned that day, they wouldn't be able to tell you. And I've tried it. I told them, oh, you're in yeshiva? Yeah, I learned yeshiva. Oh, a couple of years. Okay, what'd you learn today? Oh, I learned Gemara Masechet Tanit. Oh, what page you up to? Oh, I'm at such and such daf. Okay, what'd you learn today? I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? I don't know. We learned, but I don't know what we learned. Well, you don't remember? No, I mean, I just don't know. Why don't you know? Did you know yesterday's lesson or the week before's lesson? He goes, no, usually the Gemara lessons, I don't really understand what's saying. What do you mean you don't understand? Why don't you understand? Because I don't speak the language. So why don't you read it in a translation, in an art scroll or something? Read the translation. No, we're not allowed to use it. What do you mean you're not allowed to use it? You have to either know the language and understand what you're saying, or learn it in a different language, because the most important part is to actually understand what's being said. The most important part is to understand what's being said. Learning the language is secondary, if that much. And unfortunately, many times people end up wasting their time going to a shiur, learning in a language they do not understand, and simply finding themselves lost. Finding themselves lost. Sometimes it's not even a language barrier. Sometimes it's just simply the speaking of the specific speaker that they have just doesn't speak in a language that they understand. Either their use of their vocabulary or their accent and things of that nature. There are some great rabbis, great giants, that at times I would listen to them. I wouldn't understand a single word that they say. And I'd ask my rabbi, what did he say there? What did he say there? I would ask him. I was interested. I like him. It's a big rabbi. Obviously, what he's saying is words of wisdom. It's just my flaw that I don't understand what he's saying. So I asked the rabbi, what did he say? But not everybody has that luxury. And sometimes you'll go and you'll watch a shiur, and it may be a big rabbi, a famous rabbi, a great rabbi, but he doesn't speak the language that you understand. He either has an accent, or he has this or that, or perhaps his level of knowledge is far, far beyond yours. And you're simply finding yourself lost in La La Land during their shulim. What do? Go listen to someone else. Stop wasting your time. Listen to somebody that speaks your language. I'm not saying someone that is secular or heretic or is changing the Torah, but rather someone that teaches the truth, but in a fashion that you understand. This is one of the most important things that I tell any of my students that want to teach, any of my colleagues that want to teach or do teach. One of the most important things that a speaker, a teacher, a parent, and an individual needs to know about communication is that you have to, absolutely have to make it a priority that your audience understands what you're saying to the point where you are not allowed to assume anything about their knowledge. Meaning, don't assume that they know what you're talking about. If you're going to say, listen, you know that there is a story, the famous story about Rav such and such, don't do that. If you're going to mention that side note, mention what you're talking about. If you're going to mention something, clarify what you're mentioning. Speak in a fashion that people understand. Even if this is the first time they're ever listening to you. Even if they're experts. Even if they're brand new. Whatever it is, you have to speak clearly. You have to speak clearly. Also, you have to write clearly. You have to write clearly. Sometimes you'll see people write and it's not so clear. It's not so clear. Now, sometimes that's because they're not necessarily going to cater to your average person. They're not catering to the average person. They're catering to scholars. So, your average person looks at it as like it's Chinese, even though it's Hebrew letters. But that's because that's not their audience. On the other hand, you'll see some books, the language is very simple, even if the issue itself is not simple. I know this, for example, from Rabbi Reuven. Rabbi Reuven has two types of books. He has two types of books. He has written, Baruch Hashem, several dozen books, over 40 different books, Baruch Hashem. And now, but you have two different types. Two different types. What's the two different types? One are the book like Ach Tov L'Yisrael, and the other one is books like Doresh Tov. What is the major difference for anyone who hasn't read the two? Ach Tov L'Yisrael is not only an halachic book. There are many halachic books. But Achtov L'Yisrael, the series, it's so far, Baruch Hashem, 3 volumes have been published, and number 4 is coming soon. This is an halachic work written in the language of the Gemara, the language of the sages, the language of Talmidei Chachamim. Meaning that even if you speak Hebrew fluently, you were born in Israel, you've never left the country, but you didn't learn Torah, you'll open that book and you will understand just as much as someone that opened it in China and never spoke a word of Hebrew. Neither one of you will understand anything. Why? It's not catered for you. It's not catered for you. It's Hebrew letters, it's Hebrew words, but it's not the type of language that the average person speaks. It's not, unless you've learned Talmud, and seriously, you're not going to understand anything. And many of the Chachamim write their books that way. But then he also has a book like Doresh Tov. Doresh Tov is not only simple language, but the way it's written is that it's smooth, it's fluid. You could go through it in a breeze without skipping a beat. You get the idea in a certain way, but it's not an halachic work. It's something else. It talks about each parasha, each gives you the summary or an idea, different things. It's beautiful. And when we are distributing books, which Baruch Hashem are always free, what do? The halachic works of Achtov L'Yisrael, we only give to Torah scholars, not people that like Torah, not people that are religious, people that are scholars, rabbis, avrechim, and such. That's who we give those to. Why? Because if we give it to anybody else, it's a complete waste of time. That book, they'll like it, they'll appreciate it, they'll kiss it, and it'll go in a shelf, and no one's ever going to read it. Why? Because as soon as they open it, they won't understand anything. On the other hand, the book, Doresh Tov, we give it to everybody, both the scholar and the non-scholar. Most of the time to the non-scholar, but nonetheless, we give those to everybody. Why? Because everybody would understand it. The point being is that if you're going to teach your kids and you want them to you want to communicate to them, you have to communicate to them in a fashion where they can understand you. Don't speak in codes. Don't write things in acronyms. Don't speak in a fashion that assumes that the other party has pre-existing knowledge. Why? That is simply bad way of communicating. Many times people like to use acronyms in their writings. They like to use acronyms in their work. They like to use these code words and all types of things that assumes the other party has knowledge. And many times this is what leads to miscommunication. The same thing with parenting. You assume that your kid would know what to do and what not to do. Don't assume anything. Communicate to them clearly. Same concept when you're going to give the kids books or teach the kids. Make sure the kid knows what they're reading and what they're saying. Even more so when parents are very particular about their education and which school the kids goes to. They're more worried about the image that the families are going to have if the kid goes to a certain school versus whether this is the appropriate school for your kids. Everybody wants their kid to be the next Moshe Rabbeinu and Rav Ovadia and the Rambam. But sometimes he simply doesn't have the tools. Don't push your kid into a yeshiva that he's simply not fit in. Why he's not fit? He's not in that caliber. Even if you pay the yeshiva $1 million donation, it's not going to make your kid become Rav Ovadia. Sometimes parents push their kids to a place they don't belong, or vice versa. If your kid is really talented, don't send him to some modern Orthodox school that he's going to learn how to be a tennis player and perhaps have a few girlfriends while he's learning Chumash. You have to make sure you communicate to your kid and you put your kids in the right places. Don't just, assume things. Here, the Gaon of Vilna is going even to a simpler issue. He's saying, listen, even the books that you as the parent are going to teach the kids, make sure you use the books that speak in Yiddish. Why? Yiddish is their first language, even though they speak another language. Yiddish is their first language. Yiddish is what they'll understand for sure. And I happen to have a few Mussar books in Yiddish. Those are the books that are the cure. Those are the books that will solve all the problems. And those are the books they need to continue reading over and over and over again, regularly. Even more so on Shabbat. Why? Because this is going to teach them the foundation of how to be a mensch, the foundation of how to be a decent Jew, the foundation of how to have Yirat Shamayim, how to have the fear of the Almighty. And if a person is going to teach their kids Musar, they're going to learn how important their speech is and how important their choice of words are. And one of the most important things that a person can teach their kids from the works of Musar, which is one of the other things that the Gaon of Vilna teaches here, is make sure you teach the kids not to lie. Not to lie. Why not to lie? Why not to lie? Not to curse is obvious. But not to lie, sometimes people think, well, what if it's a white lie? What if it's a lie for this? What if it's a lie for that? The Chassidut Vizhnitz in Eretz Yisrael has a policy in their schools. And they say, the Rebbe says to them, and he says to all the teachers, if the children arrive late to school, make sure not to ask them why they're late. Usually, the policy everywhere else, both secular and public and the religious schools, is not only to ask the kid why they're late, but to even provide a note. Provide a doctor's note, a parent note, an explanation of some kind. Why? You need to have an explanation for this mistake. Chassidut Vizhnitz, opposite policy. And they're right. Why? The Rebbe says over there, if you ask the kid why he's late, you are now teaching the kid to lie. Why? He's going to be forced to lie to you. Because sometimes he'll be late for the right reason. Something happened, there's a legitimate excuse, but not always. Sometimes simply, he's late. Sometimes because he was playing. Sometimes because he's a kid. And what's going to happen? He's going to be forced to lie. And now you are enabling him to continue lying. So since you know he's going to lie, why bother? He's at the school, start teaching. First lesson is, don't ask him why he's late. Don't ask him. That's the right way, Rabotai. That's someone that's thinking about what's the outcome of my lesson. What's the outcome of my lesson? One person came to one of the Gedolim and asked him, Kvod Harav, listen, I lived a life of sin and I want to do tshuva. But I can't take on all this Torah. I don't even know enough. I want to start with one mitzvah. What mitzvah could I do in order to at least start in a good way? And the Rebbe says to him, all you need to do, stop lying. Oh yeah, but I heard about, oh no, don't worry about what you heard about. All you need to do, stop lying. That's it, Rebbe. That's where it starts, and you'll see good results from it. So, this person said, listen, the entire Torah, I can live a life of good by simply not lying. Easy enough. So, he didn't realize what kind of changes that's going to have in his life. The next day, wakes up, shows up to an appointment late. Usually, when he shows up late, he has 15 excuses. But before he started giving the excuse, he realized, wait, hold on a second. My entire eternity is depending on me doing one mitzvah of not lying. So I'm not going to lie. So he tells the person the truth. Another time, a few minutes later, he has a customer. And the customer says, are you really giving me the best deal? And now he wants to tell him, yeah, it's the best deal, but he knows it's not. And he knows I only have one mitzvah. And what ends up happening is that the customer ends up getting a better deal. Because he didn't lie. And the employees get a better boss because he didn't lie. And before you know it, he started realizing that all of his sins have something to do with lying. The gossip, the rumors, the stealing, the arrogance, all of the different things that he has have to do with lying. And by him no longer being able to lie, he ended up doing complete tshuva. If you emphasize in your chinuch to yourself and to your kids that lies are no longer an option, lies are no longer part of your life, lies are not just prohibited, lies are disgusting. Lies are something we run away from. Not the white lie, not the blue lie, not the green lie. No lie, no lying. Now, of course, you have to be wise and know that there's a time that you can be vague, but never a liar. Meaning that if your pregnant wife, 8 months pregnant, asks you, how do I look? The answer is always amazing. Even if when you're saying amazing is you're thinking about the picture of when you guys met and you were both 19 years old, not when she was 8 months pregnant. Now, of course, if you truly love your wife, you actually think she does look amazing at 8 months pregnant. But I'm talking to all types of people today. The reality is, Rabotai, is that there's sometimes a necessity to be vague. But lying, never. Why never? Simple. If you get used to lying small lies, you'll get used to lying big lies. If you are a liar, your kids will be liars. And trust me when I tell you, that's the worst thing you could ever imagine of what that leads to. Reward your kids to tell the truth, even if that means that they are admitting guilt. Perjury in our house is a mitzvah. Why? You tell me the truth that you're the one that did this, you're the one that caused the trouble, you get a present for that. You only get punished if you lie. Why? Because if you teach your kid to tell the truth, you'll have a person that is emulating the ways of Hashem 24 hours a day by simply telling the truth. And eventually when a person realizes that they can only tell the truth, sinning no longer becomes attractive to them. It becomes an embarrassment. And therefore, they refrain from doing it as much as possible. So one of the ways of chinuch is to teach your kids not to lie. But where are you going to learn not to lie? Mussar books. But they have to understand those Mussar books. That's why the Gaon of Vilna said to his wife, it's in Yiddish. In your case, it may be in English, or maybe in Hebrew, or maybe in Spanish. But make sure that whatever your kids are learning, they're learning in a language they understand. They learn in a language that they understand. Because if they're learning in a language that they understand, they're going to be able to follow what it says. This is why David HaMelech says in Tehillim, chapter 101, verse number 7, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu simply cannot stand liars. Where it says, Lo yeshev bekerev beti, oser remiyah, dover shkarim, lo yikol leneged einai. That in Tehillim 101:7 says, in the midst of my house shall not dwell a practitioner of deceit. One who tells lies shall not be established before my eyes. In so many words, David HaMelech tells us how much HaKadosh Baruch Hu despises liars, that he wouldn't allow anyone to sit next to them, to talk to him, to nothing. He hates liars. Many times, a person could literally kosherize their entire life. It will be literally as if you've put your life into a spiritual mikveh. Your place of employment, your career, your marriage, your relationship with your kids, your whole life will be going into a spiritual mikveh by simply stopping the lies. If you stop the lies, you'll see just by itself, it purifies your life. Now, of course, sometimes purification is like now dinu. which is a river of fire, so it hurts a little bit. Sometimes telling the truth in your business causes you a little bit of losses, causes you to lose a few customers because you're really not the best, causes you to do certain things, causes you to work a little harder in order to do what you said you're going to do, and so on and so forth. But trust me when I tell you, when you live a life that's full of truth, Hashem is next to you. Hashem is next to you. When you live a life of lies, Hashem is running away from you. This is one of the things that a person needs to apply into their life. Apply to their life as much as they possibly can, because when they do, they'll be able to have Hashem give them their blessing 24 hours a day. But these types of things require constant chizuk, constant support to stay on the right path. Where are you going to get that teaching? From Mussar books. This is why it is not a suggestion for anyone to learn Mussar, but rather an obligation. It was paskin la'alacha. The Yarot Dvash writes that it's impossible for a person to avoid the Yetzer Hara unless they learn Torah. Whether they're a Torah scholar or an ignorant person, man or woman, part of their Torah learning has to be learning at least one page of Musar every single day. Now, the Chaye Adam in Klal 143, and also the Mishnah Berurah, the Chafetz Chaim, in Or Chaim 112, both paskin that there's actual an obligation to learn from a book of Musar every single day. In today's world, it could be a book of Musar, it could be a lecture. Needless to say, they have to learn Musar every single day, man or woman. Also, Rabbi Chaim Volozhin, in his Sefer Nefesh HaChaim, chapter 4, section 1, explains that the reason why the sages started writing books of Musar is because the Satan fooled an entire generation of scholars by convincing them to only learn halacha, and therefore exclude the learning of Yirat Shamayim, which in essence brought many new scholars that were heretical. Why heretical? They learned the halacha, but not how to apply it, not when to apply it, not how to behave, not when to have Yirat Shamayim. And in essence came up a lot of the people that started the Enlightenment movement and all types of heretical movements. They weren't people that were ignorant of Torah. They knew Torah, but they had no Yirat Shamayim. So Rabbi Chaim Volozhin says that the reason why the sages started writing books of Musar is in order to protect the generation from getting any worse. In order to protect the generation from getting any worse and remove the stumbling block that the nation had by not having enough Yirat Shamayim, enough fear of heaven. And this is why he says that each day a person doesn't only have to learn halacha and also Musar, but actually take a moment to meditate about Hashem from a place of fear and think of doing tshuva every single day. And Khatam Sofer also quotes the Sefer in Sefer Chuta Meshulash. He himself said to his students that Khatam Sofer was one of the greatest Ashkenazi poskim in history, according to all opinions. And he himself says, a day that he does not learn from a book of Musar, he himself feels like his fear of heaven cools off a little bit. And this is about someone that is literally a Malach Hashem, an angel of Hashem. Says, if I don't learn Musar, just one day I skip. I already feel like my Yirat Shamayim falls. I already feel like it's falling. Now, sometimes people will say, listen, but if you learn all of this Musar books, you learn about reward and punishment, you'll get depressed. Constantly learning about punishment and so on. So how is it that the Gaon of Vilna is saying to his wife, not only should the girls and you learn Musar, But rather you should learn a lot of it on Shabbat. And only that on Shabbat. Isn't the Shabbat a time where you're supposed to be happy and so on? Don't Musar books make you depressed? Wrong. Wrong. According to who? According to the greatest sages that ever lived. One of them being the Gaon of Vilna, as obviously as he wrote in his letter, but even others. Even others. Such as Rabbi Yaron Kotler. Rabbi Yaron Kotler, in a Mishnat Rabbi Yaron, volume 2, page 171, he quotes Rabbeinu Yonah, which says that the fourth way, when a person delves into the words of Torah, reading the words of the prophets and the writings, and understanding the pleasantness of the rebukes, we see from here that Rabbi Yaron Kotler referred to rebuke as pleasant. He referred to Musar as pleasant. Now, what did Rabbeinu Yonah write in his Sharet Teshuva? Literally, pachad pachadim. The scariest stuff in the world is in Sharet Teshuva. He talks about kafakela, he talks about punishment, and all the 1.5 million things a person's going to get punished for. Literally, if you understand the first 5 pages, you already start crying, because you realize that you're a criminal. But this is one of the family members of the Ramban, one of the greatest sages we ever had in history. Teshuva does not know anything without Rabbeinu Yonah. And Rabbi Yaron Kotler, one of the founders of American Judaism, the Haredi movement in Judaism in America, he said it's so pleasing to hear the words of Rabbeinu Yonah. Now, for anyone who never read the book, says, oh yeah, he probably talks about, emunah and good news. No, Rabbeinu Yonah does not talk about any of that stuff. He talks about serious stuff that's scary. And Rabbi Yaron Kotler says that's pleasing. Why? Why is it pleasing? It's pleasing to learn the truth and recognize your errors, because now you can fix it. So anyone that's looking to improve their life, to them, Musar is pleasing. Anyone that wants to avoid punishment, to them, Musar is pleasing. Anyone that wants to run away from a fake life of falsehood, to them, Musar is pleasing. Who is Musar not pleasing for? Fakers, liars, people that want to be part of the fake news because they are fake themselves. People that want to believe that a person's happiness is dependent on their Facebook pictures and their Instagram accounts. People like that are going to hate Musar. Why? Because Musar is telling you truth to your face, and it's literally telling you that you are in trouble. But if you're an honest person, if you're a person that's trying to improve themselves, if you're a person that wants to have a better future than a past and a present, then you'll love Musar, and you'll find the honesty as pleasing. And that's also what Rav Wolbe, Allah Shalom, says in Adam Bikar, page 27. He writes that one of the greatest mistakes that people make is thinking that learning Musar brings depression, as a person finds himself focusing on his own shortcomings. But I can testify about my own master, Rabbi Yocham Levovitz, the Mashgiach of the Mir Yeshiva, that Musar and joy were intertwined in his life, and he often expressed out loud how pleased he was with his own lot. So here we see that the Gdolei Ador were lovers of Hashem, but also lovers of their own lives. Learned and applied Musar to their life day after day and never got depressed over it. Even if that meant that they're learning about their own shortcomings. Learning about my own shortcomings is pleasing. Why? Because now I have a diagnosis and I also have a medicine. I have a diagnosis and I have a medicine. But when I run away from the diagnosis, who knows if I'm ever going to find a medicine. This, Rabotai, is all part of our chinuch to our children, to our young girls, young daughters, but first and foremost, to ourselves. If a parent wants to have good kids, they have to start off by being good themselves. If you're good yourself, your kids will follow suit. But if you're a rotten person, why do you expect your kids to be any better than you? This is an important and very valuable lesson that should motivate and inspire each and one of us to get better. To get better. Even if you don't want to get better. Surely you don't want your kids to have a bad life. Surely you don't want your kids to live a life of sin, a life of emptiness, a purposeless life. Nobody wants that for their kids, even if they don't care about their own life. They definitely want a better life for their own kids. So even if you're not willing to do it for yourself, and even if you're not willing to do it for Hashem, do it for your kids. Teshuva is for every one of us. Whether you were born religious, not religious, think you're religious, all of us have to do teshuva. And it starts with the first person you see when you look in the mirror. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen ve'amen.